At the auction, my fiancé's junior assistant accidentally raised her paddle twice. The first time, she outbid the client's wife by a mere 300 and snatched away the necklace she wanted. Facing Michael's criticism, she stuck out her tongue. Her husband is always making things difficult for you. I just wanted to teach her a lesson. She was arrogant and rude, yet she defended Michael at every turn. It made Michael chuckle. The second time, she used an aggressive bid against me as well, blinking innocently in my direction. Pink doesn't suit someone your age anymore. Why not let me have it? As the bidding climbed round after round, Michael sighed helplessly. Ruth, your skin tone doesn't really complement Pink. Just let her have it. Chapter 1. This wasn't a particularly large auction. Most of the items wouldn't even reach 8 figures in value. The organizer was the son of one of our business rivals. Having just returned from studying abroad, he decided to hold a charity auction. To support his son, the rival personally delivered an invitation to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have attended. What I hadn't expected was that I would run into Michael here. Congratulations to CEO Wu of ASTRA Technology for winning this item with a bid of 6,300,000. The auctioneer's hammer fell for the third time. Nina stood up and gave a slight bow in the direction of Mrs. Han. Mrs. Han, who was known for her good temper, wore a rare expression of cold displeasure. Whispers immediately spread through the room. Who bids like that? Only 300 more? Everyone knows Mrs. Han has been exhausted lately because of her husband's mistress. She did that on purpose, didn't she? Michael frowned. Even he felt that Nina had gone a bit too far. But Nina merely stuck out her tongue. Her husband is always delaying project payments. I just wanted to teach her a lesson. So what if it's only 300? I happen to like the number 3. Her voice wasn't loud, yet it was enough for everyone to hear. Mrs. Han's expression darkened even further. Looking at Nina's arrogant and ill-mannered behavior, Michael actually laughed. You really are something. Don't be so willful next time. Eva, who was sitting beside me, couldn't help glancing at me. Boss. This. I withdrew my gaze and lifted the cup of coffee that our rival had personally prepared. The aroma was rich, and the latte art was beautiful. Unfortunately, I no longer had any appetite for it. The next item was soon brought onto the stage. A pink diamond necklace. The starting bid was 3 million. Ava immediately raised her paddle. This was the item I had come for. The price was reasonable. Even if I paid 10 million for it, it would count as doing our rival a favor. Besides, since I was planning to ruin his event later, I ought to offer some compensation first. By the time the bidding reached 8 million, very few people were still participating. Everyone moved in the same social and business circles. People saw each other all the time. Most bidders only raised the price symbolically. Very few would keep pushing the bid higher. The auctioneer had already brought the hammer down twice, but just as the third strike was about to fall, Nina raised her paddle again. I'll match any bid. The moment the words left her mouth, every eye in the room turned toward her. An unlimited matching bid was rarely seen in their circle. Unless people were competing out of spite, almost no one chose to bid that way. It was the kind of move that hurt others while bringing little benefit to oneself. Nina tossed her hair and turned back to give me a provocative smile. CEO Ruth, pink isn't suitable for someone your age anymore. Why not let me have it? Chapter 2. Hearing Nina's words, Michael suddenly turned around. Only then did he realize that I was here as well. Everyone's attention shifted from Nina to me. I suddenly feel like a mistress is provoking the fiancé. Ruth and Michael are already engaged. So you're not wrong. No wonder that woman was targeting Mrs. Han. Turns out she's a homewrecker too. Just watch the show. Ruth isn't exactly known for having a good temper. My engagement to Michael was common knowledge in our circle. Back then, many people had envied his luck for managing to attach himself to me when his family business was on the verge of bankruptcy. And now, he was allowing his assistant to openly snatch things away from me in front of everyone. Ava glanced at me, but her hand never stopped moving as she continued bidding. 20 million, 30 million, 40 million. Michael's expression grew darker and darker. According to auction rules, once someone declared an unlimited matching bid, they could not stop regardless of how high the price went. As the price climbed to 50 million, Michael suddenly stood up. Ruth, enough. I raised an eyebrow. Not even close. In less than 20 seconds, Nina had completely lost her earlier arrogance. Listening to the auctioneer call out the escalating prices, her face grew paler and paler. Michael walked over to my side and forced a smile. Ruth, stop bidding. I looked up at him. To be honest, Michael was indeed handsome. Otherwise, someone as hard-hearted as me would never have softened toward him. When the Wu family was facing bankruptcy, he had begged everyone in a city for help before finally coming to my doorstep. In his darkest hour, I was the only one who reached out a hand. He said that if I could save his family, he would do anything. He also said that I was not only his lover but also his benefactor, and that he would never betray me for the rest of his life. The man before me overlapped with the young man who had once knelt before me. Then the images separated. The shadow of that young man shattered completely. Seeing that I remained silent, Michael Wu gritted his teeth. Ruth, your skin tone doesn't complement pink. Just let her have it. Smash! I hurled the coffee cup straight at Michael's head. The ceramic cup split open a wound on his forehead. Blood mixed with coffee immediately stained his white shirt. Ah, what are you doing to him? Chapter 3. Nina screamed and rushed over. She frantically tried to wipe the coffee stains from Michael's clothes. When she saw the wound on his forehead, her eyes turned red with distress. You vicious woman! How can you be so cruel? Before she could finish speaking, Ava handed me her own coffee. Ah! Another scream rang out. Ava had unusual tastes and loved hot American coffee. The cup had just been served moments earlier. Nina's skin instantly turned red from the scalding liquid, and her carefully styled hair became a complete mess. Her white evening dress suffered the same fate. Covered in coffee stains and looking utterly miserable, she and Michael actually looked quite well matched. I took the bidding paddle from Ava and raised the price again. 100 million. Michael, who had been checking whether Nina was burned, froze on the spot. Nina even forgot to cry. The two of them stared at me in shock. Whispers erupted around the room once again. Can someone really bid like that? Normally, at this price, proof of funds would be required. As long as Ruth passes verification, the bid is valid. The Wu family suffered serious losses a few years ago. I wonder whether Michael can even afford 100 million. Of course Michael could afford it, but only barely. Nina completely panicked and grabbed Michael's sleeve. I don't want it anymore. I don't want it anymore. Michael's face turned ashen. No one wanted that necklace less than he did, but he knew the rules. Once the unlimited matching bid had been declared, there was no backing out. Ruth, stop making things difficult for a young girl. I stood up with a smile. Can't you tell? The one I'm making things difficult for is you. Michael, either call the police and report someone for intentionally disrupting the auction, or pay. Hearing my answer, he clenched his fists. At the mention of the police, Nina began trembling in his arms. She bit her lip as though she had suffered some enormous injustice. Michael took a deep breath. The veins on his forehead bulged. Then he forced the words out through gritted teeth. Fine, I'll pay. The auctioneer's hammer fell 3 times. Congratulations to CEO Wu of ASTRA Group for successfully winning the item. I raised my hand and applauded 3 times with a smile. Congratulations, CEO Wu. My goal accomplished. Ava and I turned to leave, but unexpectedly, the Nina who had been crying moments earlier stepped in front of us and blocked our path. Chapter 4. You can't leave. You assaulted CEO Wu and threw coffee on me. You have to pay the price for this. I'm calling the police. I raised an eyebrow. I hadn't expected her to still have the nerve to stop me. Michael grabbed her arm. Nina, stop making a scene. No one knew where Nina found the strength, but she shook Michael Wu off in one motion. CEO Wu, how much longer are you going to put up with this? Michael fell silent. I couldn't help laughing. I had no idea what kind of drama the two of them were trying to perform. As if encouraged by his silence, Nina pointed at me and shouted, You old woman, do you even realize that CEO Wu got tired of you a long time ago? He's a person, not some dog you keep on a leash. Do you really think he loves you? He'll never forget the humiliation you put him through. Because of you, people outside keep talking nonsense. Some even call him a kept husband. Growing more emotional, Nina looked around at the crowd, seeking validation. No man could ever accept a woman like that, right? The room instantly fell silent. Then a snort of laughter broke the quiet. If a woman spent that much money on me, I'd even take her last name. Someone immediately chimed in. Exactly. As if pride were worth that much money. That's over $1 billion worth of support. How many people's self-respect could that buy? Nina froze in place, looking utterly ridiculous. I glanced at Michael. His expression had become even uglier. We had been together for almost 4 years. I knew him well. He had always been a golden child, full of pride and confidence. Before the age of 23, he had never experienced any real hardship. Then bankruptcy shattered every ounce of his arrogance. Now, his pride had been pieced back together. He wanted to enjoy the benefits of living off someone else's wealth while pretending he wasn't. What he couldn't accept was having that fact stated openly to his face. By exposing the deepest insecurity hidden in his heart before so many people, Nina had done exactly that. Michael would never be grateful to her for it. Shut up! Nina jumped at Michael's roar. She blinked helplessly, completely at a loss. Looking at her expression, Michael ultimately couldn't bring himself to be harsh with her. Lowering his head, he grabbed her wrist and tried to leave. Ruth, this was my fault today. I'll come apologize to you tomorrow. Ava raised an arm and blocked his path. This lady insulted Ruth. She can't leave yet. I curled my lips into a smile. Ava always understood me best. Ever since I became an adult, no one had ever insulted me without paying a price. Michael closed his eyes. Apologize. Nina stared at him in disbelief. Apologize. Tears streamed down Nina's face. I'm sorry. Michael looked at me deeply before turning toward the exit, but Ava blocked him again. CEO woo. Now it's your turn. Michael spun around. Ruth, don't push this too. Smack. Before he could finish, my slap cut him off. Watching the clear handprint appear across his face, I couldn't help smiling. This was excessive? I hadn't even started doing the truly excessive things yet. I accepted the wet wipe Ava handed me and carefully cleaned the fingers that had touched his skin. You think we can still continue like this? Hearing that, Michael stared at me in disbelief. What do you mean, Ruth? Is something this small really worth all this? Nina is my assistant. She only came with me because she wanted to broaden her horizons. You've already hit people. You've already made a scene. What more do you want? What more did I want? Ruth, was not a philanthropist. Of course I intended to make him return everything he had taken from me, with interest. I stepped forward until my face was inches from his. Michael, I've heard the story of the farmer and the snake since I was a child. Do I look like the farmer to you? Perhaps my gaze was too aggressive, because Michael instinctively took a step back. Why, what do you mean? If you think my money humiliated you so much, then pay it back. I have always known how to take things and how to let them go. Love can be thrown to the dogs. Money cannot. Chapter 5. When I stepped out of the venue, a light rain had begun to fall. The weather in a city changed without warning. Before the auction started, the sky had been perfectly clear. Holding an umbrella, I lit a cigarette in the rain. Through the swirling smoke, I seemed to see Michael as he had been when he first came to me. The rain that day had been much heavier than this. Spring had only just arrived in a city, and the grass had not yet fully turned green. Michael wore thin clothes, and all the pride and elegance he usually carried had vanished. He said nothing. He simply knelt at the entrance of my home. In truth, Michael and I had never been particularly close. Besides, I had only recently taken over the company at the time. My half-brother was watching me like a hawk. My own father was constantly setting obstacles in my path. Originally, I had no intention of helping him, but he had a brilliant mind and a handsome face. Michael knew exactly what he was doing. The fact that he had come to me meant he already knew we had shared similar experiences. When my father nearly drove the company into bankruptcy, I had begged others for help just as he was doing now. Only after being caught in the rain yourself do you think about holding an umbrella for someone else. Whether it was because of his looks or because I valued his talent, it didn't matter. Back then, I really had softened. I still remembered the way he looked when he made his vow. He said that if he ever betrayed me, he would die a miserable death. Ruth, the rain is getting heavier. Get in the car. Ava lowered the car window and called out to me. I stubbed out the cigarette and opened the door. Michael, it's time for you to face that miserable fate. Chapter 6. Terminate all cooperation with ASTRA Group. Recall everyone from the project teams. Have the marketing department prepare a statement. Michael spent $100 million on his mistress. I am heartbroken and have decided to end the engagement. And the Lee Group is officially severing all ties with ASTRA. Ava froze upon hearing my instructions. In business, I had always preferred moderation. Rarely did I act on impulse. Ruth, this will hit ASTRA hard, but we'll suffer losses too. I said nothing. Instead, I took a folder from the safe and handed it to her. I hadn't lied to Michael. I had witnessed the story of the farmer and the snake with my own eyes since childhood. That was why, the moment I decided to help him, I kept a backup plan. Every dirty thing Michael had done over the years was recorded in this folder. The gray areas, the black areas. Either way, none of it could withstand public scrutiny. He wanted to court disaster. I was willing to grant his wish. I tossed the folder to Ava. Tomorrow night, I'll probably be leaving on a business trip. Starting the moment I leave, release one file every 6 hours. Ava accepted the folder. The moment she saw what was inside, her eyes lit up. The admiration in her gaze deepened even further. I smiled and waved her away. Go on. I have a guest coming. Send her directly to my office when she arrives. Ava put away the folder, but just as she reached the door, she suddenly stopped. She seemed hesitant, yet her voice was both serious and unwavering. Ruth, I will always stand by your side. Looking at her expression, the smile on my lips faded. A rare warmth rose in my chest. In this cold battlefield of wealth and power, Ava was the only one who stayed beside me. Not long after she left, my guest arrived. This wasn't my first time meeting Mrs. Hahn. Years ago, when I attended a Hahn Group gala with Michael, we had exchanged a few conversations. She and CEO Hahn had built their empire from nothing. Together, they had created the business giant it was today. But everyone knew that if CEO Hahn weren't unwilling to lose half of his fortune in a divorce, they would have separated long ago. Mrs. Hahn had only one child, a daughter. Under the pretense of giving her opportunities, CEO Hahn had sent her to Germany to study when she was only in middle school. She stayed away from China. She had no contact with the company, and she studied art, a field with no relevance to the family business. CEO Hahn's intentions were obvious. He wanted to keep both mother and daughter away from everything connected to the Hahn Group so he could leave his fortune to his illegitimate son. What he hadn't expected was how exceptional Augustina Hahn would become. Without relying on a single cent from her family, she earned a doctorate in finance. Now, Mrs. Hahn wanted her daughter to return to China. CEO Hahn wanted her to remain abroad forever. The two sides were locked in a stalemate. Ruth, I'd like to discuss a partnership. Mrs. Hahn took a sip of tea. The warmth and friendliness she had deliberately displayed at the auction were completely gone. Her eyes were sharp and commanding. No woman who had come this far in life was ever simple. The Hahn Group had been Astra's largest client for the past 2 years. After I helped Michael survive the crisis, Astra underwent rapid reforms. It cut 40% of its traditional industrial operations and threw itself fully into the booming new energy industry. Within just 2 years, it developed top-tier batteries and secured a partnership with the Hahn Group. In this market, only the Hahn Group had enough demand to absorb such a massive battery supply. The moment that partnership ended, Astra would fall into trouble once again, and this time, it would be far worse than merely standing on the edge of bankruptcy. Ruth Lee, if this succeeds, the Lee Group will become the largest supplier. The new energy project had attracted countless greedy eyes, mine included. I had been watching this opportunity for a very long time. The market was only so large. As long as ASTRA survived, there would never be room for me to enter. I extended my hand and shook Mrs. Hahn's. Deal. Chapter 7. After seeing Mrs. Hahn off, I received a call from home. Get your ass back here immediately. Before I could say a word, my father hung up. Looking at the call log, my good mood vanished instantly. The Lee family estate was some distance from the city center. By the time I arrived, dusk had already fallen. A housekeeper was waiting outside. Welcome back, Mississippi. I glanced at her. She wasn't the same maid who had called me second miss last time. Inside the living room, my father, my mother, my younger sister, and my illegitimate half-brother were all present. Sitting together, they almost looked like a happy family of 4. Big sister sure is busy. Mom and Dad had to wait 3 hours for you. The moment I stepped inside, Jenny's sarcastic voice rang out. Naturally, I'm much busier than you. I shot back without even looking at her. My relationship with my sister had never been good. Jenny immediately turned to complain. Mom, look at her. Seeing her younger daughter upset, my mother quickly scolded me. Ruth, can't you say something nicer to your sister? Chapter 8. I lifted my eyes and looked at my mother. It had been almost a year since we last saw each other. After an entire year, that was the first thing she said to me. To tell me to be nicer to Jenny. Fine. I'll say it again. My time is valuable. Unlike you useless people, I don't have endless free time. So if you have something to say, say it. If you have something to fart out, get it over with. Enough. My father shot to his feet. Pointing at me, he erupted in fury. I don't have a daughter like you. Look at what you've done. If your mother hadn't stopped me, I'd have beaten you today. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious about what great crime I had supposedly committed. The whole city is talking about what happened between you and Michael. Everyone keeps asking me what's going on. What nonsense about the Lee Group cutting ties with ASTRA? How dare you say something like that? Ruth, this is the business world, not some childish game. Withdraw that public announcement immediately. You couldn't even keep a man interested and let an assistant steal him away. If you're not capable enough, then hand Michael over. Do you think ASTRA is still the same company it was 4 years ago? Because of your stupidity, the Wu family has completely recovered. If you keep acting like this, you might as well hand over the company now. Otherwise, sooner or later you'll destroy it yourself. He launched into a passionate tirade. By the time he finished, his face was red from the effort. I frowned. From all that yelling, I extracted 2 important pieces of information. First, hand Michael over. Second, hand the company over. As for whom they wanted me to hand it to, I turned toward my illegitimate half-brother, Cole, who had remained silent ever since I entered. It seemed the company was meant for him. Noticing my gaze, Cole coughed lightly. Ruth, you really made the wrong move this time. When you lose, you have to accept it. My eyes slowly swept over him from head to toe. A custom-made suit, hair perfectly combed, leaning back in his seat with his fingers interlocked, looking as though everything were under his control, and perched on his face was a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. I had no idea where he learned this cliché CEO look. Did he think dressing like that would make him a real CEO? I hated that expression more than anything. I grabbed the crystal ashtray from the coffee table. Bang! The crystal ashtray slammed directly into his head. The impact was so powerful that Cole didn't even manage a scream before collapsing into the sofa. The gold-rimmed glasses he used to look sophisticated shattered into pieces. I looked down at him from above. Cole, if you run your mouth and get hit for it, then accept that too. What gave him the right to lecture me? Everyone in the living room was stunned. They hadn't expected me to actually resort to violence. Jenny shrank into my mother's arms in fright. The ferocity my father had shown toward me vanished instantly as he rushed over to check Cole's injury. After all, this was his only son, the one he was counting on to reclaim the family fortune. If I had knocked him stupid, all their plans would be ruined. Looking at the 4 of them, I tossed aside the ashtray. Oh, and one more thing. You can stop dreaming about having Coley parade around under the Lee family name and scam his way into opportunities. Both you and your precious son have already been blacklisted across the entire industry. And that Miss Lou Cole has been courting recently? I'll make sure the Lou family learns exactly what kind of person he really is. You walked that path yourself, so don't even think about letting your son walk it too. My father pointed at me, trembling with rage. You ungrateful monster. Are you trying to destroy your own brother? I shook my head. Then I answered, slowly and clearly, Dad, I'm trying to destroy all of you. Chapter 9. To avoid actually giving my father a heart attack and ending up accused of patricide, I decided to leave the estate first. What I didn't expect was for my mother to chase after me. She grabbed my hand, acting as though we were a normal mother and daughter. Ruth, I really wanted to have a proper talk with you today. I know you had feelings for Michael, and things ending up like this must be painful for you. But you have to think about the bigger picture. You invested so much money into the Wu family. Are you really willing to watch all of it go down the drain? Michael is successful now, so it's only natural that he has a bit of a temper. And honestly, I know your personality isn't exactly easy either. The two of you were never a good match. But look at Jenny. She's gentle and sweet-tempered. You know she likes Michael. Why let a good opportunity go to outsiders? I looked down at the hand gripping mine. We had never been close. It must have been difficult for her to force herself to flatter me for Jenny's sake. Mom, do you remember that today is my birthday? My mother froze. She clearly hadn't expected that question. A trace of regret flashed through her eyes, followed by panic. I'm sorry. Mommy's just been so busy. Tell me what you want, and I'll buy it for you. The corner of my mouth curled upward. Today isn't my birthday. Under her stunned gaze, I pulled my hand free. Then I stepped on the accelerator and drove away from that disgusting place. My parents didn't love me. I had known that for a long time. In families like ours, unhappy marriages were usually the result of business arrangements. But my family was different. My parents had married for love. My mother fell in love with my father at first sight and became obsessed with him. For his sake, she even defied my grandparents and secretly registered their marriage. Back then, my grandfather's family held immense power. With my grandfather's support, my father, a former illegitimate son himself, secured the inheritance rights to the Lee Group. At the time, my parents were deeply in love. They had 2 daughters within 3 years. Unfortunately, good times never lasted. As my grandfather's influence faded, so did their love. My father became increasingly impatient. At first, he simply spent more time at business functions. Later, he stopped coming home at night. Eventually, he brought other women into the house. My mother had grown up as a pampered heiress. Naturally, she refused to accept her husband's betrayal quietly. She caused scenes at home. She caused scenes at his company. As time went on, my father started avoiding her, and in a desperate attempt to attract his attention, my mother deliberately locked me outside the house. It was 18 degrees below zero, the coldest period of the year in a city. Unfortunately, her dramatic sacrifice achieved nothing. My father never even received the message. I spent half the night freezing outdoors. The next morning, when my mother found me barely alive, she finally woke up to reality. She completely gave up on the marriage and decided to leave. At the time, I was genuinely happy for her. I ran around helping her pack her luggage. I thought we were finally leaving that place together. But she only took Jenny. After that, one woman after another moved into the house as its new mistress. I remained behind alone, carefully, quietly, surviving in that household by myself. Perhaps heaven really does have eyes. When I turned 20, a major league group project collapsed. The company's cash flow broke. The entire business stood on the edge of bankruptcy. To avoid taking responsibility, my father transferred the company into my name beforehand. Then he took the money and fled overseas with his mistress and illegitimate son. Back then, my father never imagined that I would be able to save the Lee Group. By the time he realized what I had accomplished, it was already far too late. Chapter 10. When it came to my parents, I had never truly been ruthless. But since they had enjoyed enough good days, then none of them would get to enjoy any more. My mother had never worked a day in her life. She and Jenny spent extravagantly. The money my grandfather had left them had long since been exhausted. For years, they had been living off my credit cards. I canceled all of their supplementary cards and kicked them out of my villa. Ava personally led people to inventory everything piece by piece. Jewelry, designer handbags, luxury shoes. Anything purchased with my money stayed behind. My mother and Jenny screamed, cried, and threw tantrums after the bodyguards tossed them outside. They even tried to cause trouble at my company. Unfortunately, they couldn't even get through the front gate. As for my father's side, that was much simpler. Cole's company had only just gotten off the ground. After I released the news, not a single company dared to cooperate with him. Miss Liu refused even to meet him after learning his true background. With a little encouragement from me, his former friends eagerly added insult to injury. The blow proved too much for my father. He collapsed from the stress and ended up bedridden. Cole, however, wasn't the type to sit quietly. He secretly aligned himself with Michael. But Michael was having troubles of his own and had no spare energy to help him. That 100 million had practically emptied his accounts. Astra's next major payment wouldn't arrive until the following quarter. I heard he had rushed to sell several luxury cars. Just when he managed to ease the immediate crisis, even bigger problems exploded within the company. We exposed Astra's tax evasion, bribery, bidding irregularities, and bid rigging schemes. Any one of those scandals was enough to keep Michael busy for a long time. Now the entire internet was calling him an ungrateful snake, calling Astra an ungrateful company. Several executives and shareholders who were active online were dragged into the controversy as well. Michael was young. There had always been shareholders who resented him. Now that he had created such a massive scandal, those dissatisfied shareholders finally united against him. Some even wanted to sacrifice him to protect the company, making him take all the blame alone. If not for the project he held with CEO Han, Michael would have already been suspended by the board. Ava told me that Michael had been coming to the company every day. When he couldn't see me, he simply waited outside. Several young women in the secretary's office had begun to sympathize with him. Do you think he finally realizes he was wrong? I couldn't help laughing when Ava said that. He didn't realize he was wrong. He realized he was finished. By the time I returned to a city from my business trip, half a month had passed. At a Han Group gala, I saw Michael again. He had lost a noticeable amount of weight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Gone was the confident and successful man from 2 weeks ago. Now he stood on the edge of the crowd, isolated and somewhat pathetic. Augustina followed my gaze. So that's your ex-fiancé? Honestly, he's pretty underwhelming. I took a sip of wine. She wasn't wrong. He was underwhelming. Thinking she had touched a sore spot, Augustina patted my shoulder. Hey, everyone has terrible taste sometimes. I know plenty of younger guys who are much better than him. I'll introduce some to you later. I laughed. Sounds good. During this business trip, I had fully witnessed Augustina's capabilities. She managed to excel at both academics and romance. In only half a month, I had met 3 different boyfriends of hers. Michael also noticed us. Many executives from related industries had been invited to the gala. Under normal circumstances, given my relationship with Michael, I wouldn't have been invited. That was why he looked especially surprised when he saw me. Ruth, what are you doing here? I swirled the wine in my glass. The Lee Group is also one of CEO Han's potential suppliers. If you can be here, why can't I? Michael froze. Only then did he remember that I was also in the battery business. He grabbed my hand and lowered his voice. We need to talk. You know my relationship with the Han Group. You don't stand a chance. I know several excellent clients as well. If you're willing to talk to me, I can introduce them to you. Chapter 11. Not necessary. Augustina answered for me. The conversation was interrupted, and Michael turned toward her with obvious irritation. But the moment he saw her face, he froze. Why are you here? I had almost forgotten. Michael had seen photos of Augustina before. According to CEO Han's plans, Augustina Han was never supposed to appear in China. Michael immediately sensed that something was wrong. His eyes swept across the room. Only then did he realize that CEO Han, the host of the event, was nowhere to be seen. What is going on? I smiled. The moment he saw that smile, his heart sank. His contract with the Han Group was the last bargaining chip he had left. If he lost even that, there would truly be no possibility of a comeback. I stepped closer and spoke softly. Michael, do you remember the promise you made? In just a few seconds, sweat covered his forehead. His voice trembled. Ruth, I was wrong. There's nothing between me and that assistant. I was confused. It was my fault. I raised a hand and cut off his confession. You said that if you ever betrayed me, you would die a miserable death. He stared at me in horror. I walked past him and took Augustina's hand, but after only 2 steps, a loud thud sounded behind me. Bang! Michael had dropped to both knees. Ruth, I love you. I can't live without you. Please forgive me. The shout instantly drew everyone's attention. Whoa, what's CEO Wu doing? If you're going to confess your love, at least pick the right place. Among the guests were several people who had attended the auction. You don't know? A while ago Michael stole a necklace Ruth wanted. Looks like the lovebirds had a fight. Then he deserves it. Still, Kneeling in public like this? Michael must really be devoted. Hearing the crowd's reactions, Michael seemed encouraged. He shuffled forward on his knees until he reached me. His eyes overflowed with what looked like deep affection. Ruth, I promise I'll replace every female assistant with male ones. I'll never let you misunderstand me again. Let's stop fighting, okay? Michael had knelt before me twice. The first time, he received real money and real help. The second time, he still dared to hope for my forgiveness. Did he really think a man's knees were made of gold? Just then, a female voice shattered the atmosphere. Michael, what are you doing? Nina rushed over. Is she making things difficult for you again? She pointed at me. You're unbelievable. Can't you just leave us alone? Michael doesn't even love you. Smack. Shut up. Chapter 12. Nina's voice abruptly cut off. She covered her face and turned around in disbelief. Michael, you hit me? Not just Nina, everyone present widened their eyes in shock. Michael had actually hit a woman. Augustina couldn't help poking my arm. Your taste in men is truly terrible. The disdain in her voice was impossible to hide. For some reason, I suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Tears rolled down Nina's cheeks one after another. Around her neck still hung the outrageously expensive necklace that had once symbolized their so-called love. Covering her face, she demanded hysterically, I've always looked out for you. When your mother was sick, I was the one who took care of her. And you're hitting me? What nonsense are you talking about? Michael hurriedly tried to distance himself. I won't allow you to drive a wedge between me and my fiancé. He grabbed my hand. Ruth, don't listen to her. She's imagining things. She's lying. Before I could react, Nina grabbed Michael by the collar. I'm lying? You were the one who said you never loved Ruth. You said you only valued her abilities. You said you'd been fed up with her for a long time. You told me all of that yourself. And now suddenly I'm the one who's lying? Under the shocked gaze of everyone present, Nina punched Michael square in the face. Then she tore the necklace from her neck and hurled it at him. Spit! I was blind to fall in love with someone like you. Michael, you're not worthy of being called a man. With that, Nina turned and walked away. She looked delicate and slender, but apparently she packed quite a punch. The blow sent Michael crashing to the floor. For a moment, the banquet hall was so silent it was almost frightening. I crouched down and looked at Michael's bruised and battered face. Ruth. He raised a hand toward me. Just like 4 years ago. He wanted me to pull him back up. The corner of my lips lifted. For the first time in a long while, I smiled at him. Michael, it's time for you to face that miserable fate you promised yourself. Chapter 13. The banquet continued. Security escorted Michael out. CEO Han never appeared throughout the entire event. Augustina represented the Han group from beginning to end. Before the banquet concluded, she officially announced that the Han group would terminate its partnership with ASTRA and begin cooperating with the Lee group instead. Everyone present was sharp enough to read between the lines. After witnessing the spectacle at the beginning of the evening, they all understood what had happened. Not a single person mentioned Michael's name again. Instead, they all congratulated me. The day after the announcement became public, Michael was suspended for damaging the interests of ASTRA Group in the massive corporation that ASTRA had become. Not a single shareholder spoke in his defense, and suspension was only the beginning. A series of investigations would soon follow. Based on the evidence I had released, 7 or 8 years in prison would not be surprising. I also poached his entire research and development team. The years of effort he had poured into building his empire ended up benefiting me instead. His downfall was almost tragic. No one had expected things to spiral this far because of an assistant. Still, the person who suffered most wasn't Michael. It was Cole. He had been counting on Michael to help him make a comeback. Now even that last hope had vanished. Later, my father came to see me again. He looked several years older. His hair had turned noticeably whiter. For the first time, he even seemed genuinely remorseful. He shed a few tears in front of me. How ridiculous. A man who had spent his entire life manipulating people's feelings was suddenly heartbroken over losing his daughter's affection. Clearly, brute force hadn't worked. Now he was trying the pity tactic. I didn't expose him. Instead, I gave him and Cole a chance. The company was opening a new branch in Africa. I told them that if both of them worked there for a full year, I would return the company to my father. He made me confirm it over and over again. He even insisted that I put it in writing. In the end, he and Cole boarded the plane happily. I personally went to see them off, because I knew they would never come back. My mother tried the same pity tactic. She was far better at it than my father. When I visited her, she couldn't even get out of bed. She lay in a shabby basement apartment, her face pale as a ghost, holding my hand weakly. She said, "Ruth, Mommy doesn't know how much longer she has to live. I know I've failed you. I won't be able to make up for it in this lifetime. I'll have to carry that debt into hell. But your sister is innocent. The mistakes I made shouldn't be taken out on her." As soon as she finished speaking, Jenny threw herself onto her mother and burst into tears. I stared at the two of them expressionlessly. If I hadn't known she merely had a cold, I might have thought she was actually dying. I stood up and smoothed out the wrinkles she had left on my shirt. "When you're dead, the debt dies with you. We can talk about it then." The two crying figures froze. My mother abruptly looked up. "You really want me to die that badly?" Looking at her face, I said nothing. For years, there had been questions I wanted to ask. Why? Why had she only taken Jenny with her? Why hadn't she taken me too? Or, if she could only choose one child, why not take me and leave Jenny behind? But as I looked at her now, I no longer wanted answers. I had always known them. Wasn't it simply because she didn't love me? I had known that all along. When you and Jenny left me behind, you should have known this day would come. Mom, don't appear in front of me again, because if you do, I honestly don't know what I might do to you. Ignoring their cries, I opened the door and walked away. Before saying those words, I thought it would hurt. I thought it would tear me apart. But the only thing I felt now was relief. Ava had been waiting outside the entire time. When she saw me come out, she let out a breath of relief. Then she looked at me carefully. "Augustina just called. She wants to invite you out for hot pot tonight." I rubbed my temples. After signing the contract with the Han Group, I had been so busy that my feet barely touched the ground. Coming here today had already required squeezing time out of an impossible schedule. How could I possibly have time for hot pot? "No," Ava pouted. "Boss, let's go." She looked slightly embarrassed. Augustina also invited 5 handsome younger men. 5? She said 1 for you, 1 for me, and 3 for herself. "So, we're going."